Far from the city, there was a forest people called the Forest of Dreams. By day, it was lush and peaceful, a place where one could escape the noise and the dust of the city and get lost in the quiet embrace of ancient trees. But at night, the forest transformed. Light shimmered from the leaves, butterflies glowed like fireflies, and the air carried a music so enchanting that it pulled at the heart. People said if someone entered the forest at midnight, they could witness their greatest desire. But there was one condition: whoever saw their desire would become part of the forest forever. One night, two friends, Edward and Lily, wandered into the forest. They walked along a path less traveled, their footsteps muffled by the soft carpet of leaves that covered the ground. The moon was their only guide, its silvery light filtering through the dense canopy overhead to paint the forest floor in shades of silver and gold. As the clock tower in the distance struck 12, the forest erupted in a symphony of light and sound. Fireflies blinked in the trees, their tiny lights twinkling like 1,000 stars fallen to earth. The air grew thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and the sound of distant laughter echoed through the trees, inviting them to explore deeper into the woods. Lily stopped to admire a luminous flower that glowed with an ethereal light. Its petals, a delicate shade of blue, seemed to absorb the moonlight and release it in waves of soft radiance. "Edward, look," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This place is so beautiful. It feels like we've stepped into a magical world." Edward's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "If it's true, then I want to see my desire." Lily turned to him, her smile fading slightly. "Are you sure, Edward? If the stories are true, once you see your desire, you can never leave this place." "I'm sure," he said, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. He wanted to see his desire, whatever the cost. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow taller, their branches reaching towards the sky like eager worshippers. The air grew heavy with anticipation, and Lily felt a growing unease settle in her chest. She looked at Edward, his face illuminated by the otherworldly glow of the forest, and saw a determination there that made her sad. At the heart of the forest, they reached a lake. Its surface was like a flawless mirror, reflecting the stars as though the heavens had descended onto the earth. The water was still and silent, holding secrets as old as time itself. This was the place where the boundaries between dreams and reality blurred, where desires took shape and destinies were decided. Edward walked towards the lake, his eyes fixed on the rippling water. As he gazed into the depths, he saw a vision of himself ruling over a vast kingdom. He saw himself as a powerful king, strong and respected, with a crown of gold upon his head and a scepter of authority in his hand. His heart raced as he saw loyal subjects bowing before him, their faces upturned in adoration. He saw a queen by his side, beautiful and graceful, her love for him evident in every glance and touch, and he saw children, his children, their laughter echoing through the halls of his grand palace. He turned to Lily, his eyes shining with the reflected light of the lake. "Lily, this is my destiny. I'm supposed to be a king." Lily, who had watched the transformation of the forest and Edward's growing obsession with a mixture of fascination and dread, knew that this moment was not real. She knew that the forest was showing Edward not his destiny, but his deepest desire, the life he had always dreamed of living. But she also knew that if he chose to stay, he would be giving up his life in the real world for an illusion, a beautiful, shimmering illusion. As Edward stood there lost in his vision, the light around him began to fade, the music of the forest grew distant, and when he turned back to Lily, he saw that she was no longer there. In her place was a sapling, a small tree with delicate leaves that shimmered in the fading light. And as he reached out to touch it, the tree grew, its branches reaching up to embrace him, its leaves rustling in a language he couldn't understand, but which spoke of ages past and futures that could have been. And as the last of the light faded, Edward understood. He had seen his desire, but now it was too late. He was becoming part of the forest, part of a dream that wasn't his own. The air grew colder as Lily pushed through the trees, their bare branches clawing at her clothes, their shadows clawing at her skin. She could feel Edward's grip on her hand tighten. Soon, though, he stopped, his fingers curling into the bark of a tree. "What is it?" Lily asked, peering between the branches. All she saw was the dark wall of trees ahead and the fading light of dusk. "Look," Edward whispered, pointing at the ground. Lily bent down and brushed some leaves aside and gasped. The earth here was a mirror, smooth and polished, reflecting the darkening sky and the tortured trees like a funhouse mirror, distorting and multiplying everything. It was beautiful and terrifying. "How can we be sure it isn't a trap?" Lily asked, tracing a finger across its surface. She had seen enough fairy tales to know that enchanted mirrors were rarely what they seemed. Edward cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away a tear that had escaped before she could stop it. "We have no choice, Lily," he said, his voice grave. "If we don't try this, the blight will take everything from us. It's already taken Papa." She knew he was right. She had seen the blight take her father, watched him wither away into a husk, his skin like old parchment, his eyes like chips of ice. It had been 3 years since then, 3 years of her parents trying to break the curse that had fallen on their family, a curse that would eventually take her and Edward too. If she didn't do something, the forest would claim them both. Taking a deep breath, she looked back at the gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Then she turned back to the mirror, and together they stepped inside. Lily gasped. In the water, she saw herself sitting in a radiant garden. Her nightgown had become a flowing white dress, and around her were countless butterflies whose wings shimmered with every color imaginable. Beside her sat a boy who looked like Edward, except his clothes were finer, his expression happier. He took her hand and smiled at her, his eyes shining with mirth. She felt lighter somehow, unbound. For the first time in years, she felt free. Free to laugh, free to run, free to love. But then the water rippled and the reflections began to move. Slowly they stepped out of the lake, alive. Meanwhile, the real Edward and Lily felt themselves being pulled into the water, sinking deeper and deeper. "Edward!" Lily screamed in terror, reaching for him, but her hand only met water. "These aren't us," she cried, her voice echoing in the vastness of the lake. "They're our dreams swallowing us whole." Within moments, the real Edward and Lily were gone, dragged into the depths by their doppelgangers who took their place on the shore. There they stood, a king and a free girl, alive and breathing, yet no longer real. And so, the Forest of Dreams gained 2 new souls. They say even now anyone who enters the forest sees their greatest wish. But in the Forest of Dreams, every wish granted comes with a price that sometimes includes your soul.